Thank you for listening to We Have Ways of Making You Talk. Sign up to our Patreon to receive bonus content, live streams, and our weekly newsletter with money off books and museum visits as well, plus early access to all live show tickets. That's patreon.com/wehaveways.
This podcast is supported by Progressive, a leader in RV insurance. RVs are for sharing adventures with family, friends, and even your pets. So if you bring your cats and dogs along for the ride, you'll want Progressive RV insurance. They protect your cats and dogs like family by offering up to $1,000 in optional coverage for vet bills in case of an RV accident, making it a great companion for the responsible pet owner who loves to travel. See Progressive's other benefits and more when you quote RV insurance at Progressive.com today. Progressive Casualty Insurance Company and Affiliates. Pet injuries and additional coverage and subject to policy terms.
This episode is brought to you by Peacock. The new Peacock original documentary, Matthew Perry, A Hollywood Tragedy, dives deep into the beloved actor's rise to fame and his tragic death. 5 people, including Perry's personal assistant, 2 medical doctors, and an alleged Hollywood drug dealer known as the Ketamine Queen, were charged with conspiracy to illegally provide Perry with the ketamine. Explore the details of the case in this heartbreaking special, streaming now only on Peacock.
TaxAct knows filing your small business taxes can be a nightmare, like the kind where you're being chased by a giant W-2 form and you're running and running, but you can never reach the submit button. Or something like that. So, TaxAct offers Expert Assist with live tax experts to make filing taxes less scary. Now, you can just have pleasant dreams about being chased by other giant, non-threatening paperwork. TaxAct. Let's get them over with.
We passed over a destroyed land. You have not seen it, do not know what hell looks like. We can have today only one purpose, and that is to see this thing through to the end.
Meanwhile, in the Ardennes, the Americans have recaptured the initiative, moving step by step back over the lost ground.
Oberst Peiper is a very arrogant, typical SS man, thoroughly imbued with the Nazi philosophy. He is very proud of his regiment and division, and is inclined to make derogatory remarks about other units. Did you honestly expect to reach the Meuse River in one day?
If our own infantry had broken through by 0700 as originally planned, my answer is yes. I think we might have reached the Meuse in one day.
Well, those were extracts from the Introduction to Foreign Military Study, ETH Int 10, and then their subsequent interview notes with Oberst Peiper after the war about Kampfgruppe Peiper's efforts in the Battle of the Bulge. Welcome to We Have Ways of Making You Talk with me, Al Murray, and Jay Solid, of course. That was like being a fly on the wall, wasn't it, Jim?
Yeah, it was really. I mean, they're extraordinary, these foreign
Ein
military
Flieger auf
studies.
der Mauer.
Yeah, and the ones with Piper are fantastic. There's a series of them, and it's really fantastic because they start off with a translator speaking in German, and then halfway through he corrects them in perfect English. Yeah, says no, I didn't say it's exactly like that. Absolutely brilliant.
Piper's a bugger. That's what we're going to discover.
Well, yes. I mean, it's interesting. You know, here we are on episode 5 of our Battle of the Bulge series, and we're going to dedicate this entire episode to the exploits of Kampfgruppe Peiper. And it's kind of, you know, we've been sort of discussing how to present this story, because there are all these different numbers, you know, divisions with numbers, and whether they be German or American, and it can get kind of confusing, particularly when you're just telling the story rather than showing the story.
Yes.
And I think the way to do it is to do it slightly episodically and see the Battle of the Bulge. Yes, it's one big battle, but it's also a series of different battles. Yeah, all kind of sort of wrapped up in the same thing. So I think that's the approach we've kind of rather taken.
Well, and that is how the Germans have decided to fight it, by breaking people up into these Kampfgruppes and
going on these thrusts.
These improvised formations, essentially going on their own little journeys. You know, the different Rollbahn from A through to E actually sort of tell that story in themselves, don't they? So
yeah. Absolutely. But Kampfgruppe Peiper is one of the main thrusts in the first SS Panzer Corps. He's the commander of the lead Panzer Regiment of the 1st SS Panzer Division Adolf Hitler Leibstandarte.
Right.
And as we've already discussed, Sepp Dietrich, who's the commander of the 6th Panzer Army, his plan is to use the Volksgrenadier divisions for the break-in, and then his Panzer regiments beefed up into battle groups for the charge to the Meuse. You know, all these Panzer regiments. So the commander of the Panzer regiment is the commander of the battle group, or the particular Panzer company or battalion is the commander of the battle group. And they're given additional troops, so artillery, anti-aircraft artillery, anti-tank artillery, and also Panzer Grenadiers, of course. So what this means is a huge amount of vehicles. It's not just your Panzers, it's not just your King Tigers and your Panthers and what have you.
Yep.
It's also infantry in half-tracks and trucks and all the rest of it.
Yeah.
Anyway, so who is Obersturmbannführer Joachim Peiper?
I mean, he is, without doubt, one of the sort of famous jaunty-hatted Nazi.
Well, he's also the best looking, isn't he? Let's face it. I mean,
well,
he's got film star looks.
I don't know. You always say this. I'm quite happy to say I can't tell if he's good looking or not, do Jim? No, but I see his jaunty hat, and I just think,
and his SS skull and crossbones.
Well, and I see his reputation, and I think, well, you know, you might be a handsome devil, but the emphasis is on the devil bit rather than the handsome.
Yeah. Anyway. Be that as may, he's 29 years old, and he's got a very interesting career, really, because he comes from a pretty right-wing family. Let's face it. He's joined the SS at a pretty early stage. He's very into National Socialism. He's also been Himmler's adjutant.
Yeah,
he took a little bit of time off in the summer of 1940 to go and fight with the 1st Waffen-SS Panzer Division.
Yeah.
Did pretty well. Went back to being Himmler's adjutant. Then went off and commanded troops in the Eastern Front. Rose up to be a pretty young regimental commander. I mean, there's not many people that age are an Obersturmbannführer, which is sort of colonel.
Yes, you see, what must it have been like if Himmler's adjutant turns up and he's been posted to you as an officer? Do you think, well, he only got that job because of his connections? For Peiper, it must have been he's always having to prove himself, surely, because he has turned up. He's not worked his way through the ranks of the Waffen-SS. He's dolloped in, having come from head office, as it were. It must be a peculiar position to be in, right?
Yeah.
He's got lots to prove, right? That's what I'm saying.
Yeah, and he's from a sort of middle-class background as well.
Yeah.
But he's got an older brother who's had mental illness and attempted suicide and never really recovers, and actually has died of TB eventually in 1942.
Gosh.
He's got a younger brother called Horst, who's also joined the SS and Toten Kopfverbande and died in a never really properly explained accident in Poland in 1941.
Right.
Peiper gains a sort of growing reputation on the Eastern Front for being kind of very inspiring, fearless, obviously courageous, all the guys love him, all that kind of stuff. But he's also orders the destruction of the entire village of Krasnaya Polyana in a kind of revenge killing by Russian partisans.
Yeah.
And his unit becomes known as the Blowtorch Battalion because of his penchant for torching Russian villages. So he's got all the gongs. He's got Iron Cross, Second Class, First Class, Cross of Gold, Knight's Cross. Did very well at Kursk. Briefly in northern Italy, actually. Then in Ukraine. Then in Normandy, he suffers a nervous breakdown.
Yeah.
And he's relieved of his command on the 2nd of August. And he's hospitalised from September to October. So he's not in command during Operation Lutich. And then he rejoins 1st SS Panzer Regiment as its commander again in October 1944. It's really, really odd. I mean...
But isn't that interesting, though? Because if you're a Lancer, if you're an ordinary soldier, you're not allowed to have a nervous breakdown. You don't get hospitalised. You don't get time off. How you could interpret this is a sort of Nazi princeling, isn't he? He's Himmler's adjutant. He's demonstrated the necessary Nazi zeal on the Eastern Front and all this sort of stuff. It comes to Normandy where they're losing. Why else would he have a nervous breakdown? He's shown all the zeal and application in the Nazi manner up to this point, and they're losing, and because he's a knob, because he's well connected, he gets to be hospitalised if he has a nervous breakdown. He isn't told, like an ordinary German soldier, there's no such thing as combat fatigue, mate, go back to work.
Yes, and it's a nervous breakdown, not combat fatigue.
Well, yes, of course.
But
What's
one
the difference?
SS soldier said of him, Peiper was the most dynamic man I ever met. He just got things done.
Yeah.
You get this image I have of him of having this kind of sort of slightly manic energy.
Yeah.
Kind of, he's virulently National Socialist. He's got this great reputation. He's damned if anyone's going to tarnish it. He's a driver, all those things.
He's trying to make the will triumph, isn't he? He's working towards the Führer. He's imbued with, he knows what's expected of him, extreme violence and cruelty and pushing his men on. I mean, he's the Führer principle writ large, isn't he, as an SS officer? Which is why cruelty and extreme violence are bundled in to wherever he goes, basically.
And yet it's amazing because, you know, he is very young. And when you look at
Yeah.
pictures of him at his post-war trial, by which time he's 31 or something,
Yeah.
he still looks pretty babyface, really, in the big
Yes.
scheme of things. And it kind of, it's hard to, you know, you look at sort of Goalhanger, for example. I mean, he looks like a total
Yes, he looks
bastard.
like a villain and a bastard, yeah.
But Peiper doesn't. I mean, you know, looks mean nothing, do they? They sort of do in your mind's eye. That's a
Well,
weird
I
thing.
don't know.
Anyway,
I think the thing is we can judge the book by the cover. We can also read the contents of the book. In the case of Joachim Peiper, and be quite appalled by it. I mean, it's little wonder he's been given this Kampfgruppe because, as you say, his reputation is he's a thruster. He gets stuff done. He's extremely well connected, you know. And Dietrich is SS through and through. So you're going to give the point of the spear in this particular part of the Ardennes offensive. You're going to give a job like this to Joachim Peiper.
yes.
Because he'll get it done. He'll give whatever it is you want. He'll get it
You
done.
know, he's out of hospital. He's back on form.
Yeah.
He's a man you want. Anyway, he's been rebuilding the regiment, which obviously gets
Yes.
completely hammered. This is the first SS Panzer Regiment of the 1st SS Panzer Division in Minden in Westphalia in Germany, following his, you know, his complete mangling in Normandy.
Yeah.
Unofficially, he gets wind of the Ardennes offensive 4 or 5 days before it happens, but not before that. And that's when Brigadeführer Fritz Kramer, who we've already mentioned is a chief of staff of 6th Panzer Army and who in the eyes of many is the real kind of brains behind it, rather than Sepp Dietrich, who's a bit of a kind of, you know, not the sharpest tool in the shed.
Yeah.
And Kramer asked him his thoughts about an attack through the Eifel region.
That's subtle, isn't it?
Bit
5
of
days,
a clue, isn't it?
5 days before a trial. I was just wondering, what if we were to try a push through the Eifel
Hypothetically,
region?
you understand. Anyway, Kramer wants to know whether a panzer regiment could travel 80 kilometers through the night, 50 miles. And Peiper says, you know, I don't want to give you an answer straight away, sir. You know, I'll let me test it out. So he takes a Panther and runs it from Euskirche to Blankenheim, which is in the Eifel region, but obviously on the German side of the border. And he concludes that it is definitely possible, but you need a free road.
Right, okay.
And you need a decent road. You need
I
a
mean,
decent road and you need no other traffic on it.
That's a no then, isn't it? If we're honest. But, I mean, the thing is so much of this plan relies on a free road and no opposition, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Completely relies on it.
Anyway, his panzer regiment, leaves the Minden area at 7 p.m. on the 13th. And then they have to kind of get to their assembly area on the, you know, in the Eifel at around the morning of the 14th of December, when they do so in thick fog.
Yeah.
And Peiper says the whole thing was to be announced to the troops only when they fell in immediately prior to departure. It was complete blackout during the night and radio silence.
See, it's interesting, isn't it? Because this is why they offer such surprise when the battle begins. But that also makes organising very, very difficult. Organising in fog,
impossible.
In fog with radio silence, that's really, really hard.
In winter.
With
16 hours of darkness.
So, yes, sure, it offers them tactical advantage, but it's a pain in the arse for them. Yeah, I mean, he knows what he's doing, though, Peiper. That's one of the things about him, right? He does know what he's doing.
Yeah, he does know what he's doing.
Yeah.
And that day, this is only the 14th of December, this is 2 days before it starts, he's called to Tondorf and the command post of the 1st SS Panzer Division, where the commanding officer, Oberfuhrer Wilhelm Mörnke, briefs him and other commanders on the entire plan. And this is when Peiper learns that he's going to be actually part of a battle group. So he's given an additional engineer battalion, an additional battalion of corps artillery of 150mm and 210mm howitzers, which are big boys, which
those
require
are big guns. Yeah,
they're big guns. You know, you're not pulling those with horses. You're pulling those with big track Panamags and all the rest of it.
Yeah.
Altogether, Peiper's got 4,800 troops, 800 vehicles, including 117 panzers, 149 half-tracks, 24 artillery pieces, and 30 anti-aircraft weapons.
Right.
And it's now going to be called Kampfgruppe Peiper. He's got Panzer IVs, Panthers, and Tiger 2s. And he's also got attached to him one of these ludicrous Skorzeny units from the 150 Panzer Brigade, you know, in their Sherman tanks or whatever, which is 500 men, but they're sort of tabbed onto the back.
Yeah.
And not really doing it, you know. And the plan is for him to kind of go up the Lossheim Graben, which we mentioned when we were talking about Lieutenant Bauch, yeah.
Yes.
And he's given a very, very prescribed route. And he says to his superiors, these roads were not for tanks, but for bicycles. But they would not even discuss it. They said it was the Führer's order that I should take this route. So
Yeah.
that's what they do. I mean,
Yes.
Piper's very dismissive of the Skorzeny units he gets. He goes, they might as well have stayed at home because they were never near the head of the column where they had planned to be.
Yeah.
It all feels like this has been, he's got the whiff of a kind of sort of, hey guys, here's an idea. What about this?
Yeah.
You know, and what we could do is we could get the Skorzeny lot and we could give them Shermans and put them in Jeeps. How cool is that? And everyone goes, yeah, it's going to be brilliant. We're going to really fool the Americans here. And there's such a sort of disconnect from the planning and the concept to the reality.
But also, he took the one Panther, he did the distance overnight with one Panther, hoping for a clear road. He's got 800 vehicles. He's not going to be, I can tell you, he's not going to be able to do that. It's just impossible. And also, it's all very well. Again, the issue here is it's all very well doing this in secrecy, but organising a formation like that at 2 days' notice and having extra things bolted on, you've got to be very, very confident that your headquarters works and that everyone knows what they're doing, right? You've got to be super confident that everyone's singing from the same hymn sheet, or this will not work. This is
and you also need to make sure that when you start, you're in prime position.
Yeah.
Guess how long their march order is? 15 miles.
Yeah, there we are.
800 vehicles, that's 15 miles. That's how long that is. And he's got 2 train loads of fuel have been promised, but lo and behold, they don't reach them.
Ah, okay.
Thanks to RAF bombing and
and they're supposed
AAF
to
bombing.
Yeah, and they're supposed to take captured fuel, sort of Japanese.
Well,
army
they
style.
say, our train notes haven't come up, so you can just capture some fuel instead. So they give them maps which shows US fuel dumps at Bullingen and Stavelot. But will they still be there? Will the Americans have torched them? Will the Americans have moved them?
Are they even there? Are they even there? And are there others and all that? They just don't know, do they? They're whistling, really.
Anyway, on the night of the 15th, 16th, so this is the launch of Herbstnebel, Peiper moves his men up to a wood north of the town of Stadtkiel, which they're still not right at the front line because they're behind the 9th Fallschirmjäger Regiment, part of the 3rd Fallschirmjäger Division. And it is the 9th Fallschirmjäger Regiment that get held up by Bauck.
Bauck, yeah, to great
slaughter. So they're behind them. So already they've got vehicles and men and etc. in front of them. It's not going to be straightforward. Anyway, he waits in the woods near Stadtkiel, which is not a million miles away from Lanzarat, which is a village where Bauck was. On the hill above Lanzarat was where Bauck was. And they wait in the woods most of the day until 4 p.m. when he's given the nod to get moving at long last. After an hour, they reach a blown-out bridge. Peiper tells his tanks and half-tracks to drive down the depression up the other side, but as they advance beyond the blown bridge, the leading Panthers then hit mines, so 2 of those are brewed up immediately. Lieutenant Werner Sternebeck says, our 2 Panthers, which were thought of as battering rams, were lost for the rest of the deployment without having made any contact with the enemy.
Well, there it is. It's possible with a free road. 3 anti-tank mines, or however many, a handful of anti-tank mines, and the whole thing's gone wrong already. I mean, there's this amazing encounter, though, is in the Cafe Stolzen at Lanzarat, which is now a disco or a nightclub, isn't it?
Yes. Yeah, it's absolutely amazing. It is.
Yeah.
The same building. By this point, he's absolutely spitting because he knows the huge pressure's on him. He knows that, everyone's looking at him to be one of the main strike forces of this attack. And here he is in the kind of early hours of the 17th of December, and he's barely moved. He certainly hasn't crossed kind of, enemy lines at this point. And so he gets there and storms into Cafe Stolzen and says to the colonel, Oberst Hoffmann, who's the commander of the 9th Fallschirmjäger Regiment, goes, "Why on earth have you stopped?"
Yeah.
Because Peiper's a lieutenant colonel, albeit an SS one, and Hoffmann is a full colonel. So Hoffmann outranks him. It's pretty insubordinate.
Yeah. Yeah. Well,
Peiper grabs a map and using 2 bayonets pins it to the wall.
But Bauck is witnessing this, isn't he? Because he's being held prisoner there. So Lieutenant Lyle J. Bauck sees this whole encounter.
He sees the whole thing, yeah.
Yeah.
He absolutely blows a gasket.
Yeah. And he discovers that the Fallschirmjäger haven't recce'd the area ahead of them. I mean, they don't know what they're doing because they're
crap. Because they're not very well trained.
Yeah. And he's getting the Pervitin in order to keep going, of course.
Yeah, which is never a really good sign. Doesn't do any wonders for your mental health, it has to be said.
And they can't move that night. So he's reorganising and trying to start again, basically. He's got to start again the following day, hasn't he?
Yeah, he's moved up from his start position 15 miles.
Yeah.
And they're 18 hours behind schedule. That's not great. So anyway, off they go. They head off in the following morning to, the early hours of the 17th of December to Honsfeld, which is the first kind of village they come to, which you and I went and visited the other day.
Yes.
Half-tracks in the lead, followed by panzers and some Fallschirmjäger troops riding on top, while others clear the woods either side. And this is your absolute classic road through forest of pines. And there's pictures of Tiger IIs doing this exact route from Peiper's Campfgruppe. And
with Fallschirmjäger on them.
Yeah, exactly. They reach Honsfeld within a half hour of leading Landsrat. You go up the hill out of Landsrat, you turn left through the woods. Hansfeld's on the other side.
Yeah.
It's a couple of miles, isn't it? It's nothing more than that. The spearhead then hurries on through the village of Honsfeld while follow-up troops shoot at windows. There's a handful of kind of echelon Americans there, aren't there?
Yes.
And troops that have been pulled back, they return fire. They're clearly outnumbered, so they soon surrender. A number of prisoners are rounded up and shot.
There's those kind of instances where there's a Sarge, the Germans are here, stopped kidding around, looks out window, sees half-track full of Germans. There's that stuff going on. It's an LOC place, line of communication place. They're expecting that day, an entertainment visit, aren't they?
Yes. Isn't it Marlene Dietrich?
It's Marlene Dietrich, yeah.
It's been cancelled, to be fair.
Cancelled, of course.
But they shoot 19 Americans in Honsfeld. Yeah. Panzer Grenadiers then loot the houses, and Peiper details a number of the Fallschirmjäger to stay behind.
Yeah.
Dead Americans stripped, boots taken off, all that kind of stuff. I mean, it's sort of standard fare for enemy troops that are a bit under resourced themselves. 2 days later, I mean, terrible episode, and this is done by the Fallschirmjäger rather than rather than Peiper's men. They demand a guide from the locals in Honsfeld, and an adult volunteers, but instead they choose a kind of very good-looking 16-year-old girl called Erna Collis. She goes off of them and never seen later until 5 months later. Her body's found in a foxhole riddled with bullets.
Yeah.
So these are dehumanized, tough people. Peiper then makes the decision to leave most of his trucks in Honsfeld because already the roads are getting churned up. And of course they're going to when you've got 68-ton Tiger IIs.
Well, and he's trying to get to the next place as quickly as he can, Bullingen, where, as far as on his map, there's fuel. So he thinks there's a fuel dump at Bullingen. And on his way there, he bumps into a column of American trucks heading south.
Yep.
So the Americans, because it's nightfall, no one knows who anyone is. The lead SS car flashes a red torch. The trucks stop. The Americans surrender. And Siegfried Jackal, one of Peiper's men, I mean, they've all got bad guy names. They were unarmed and held their hands in surrender position. I shot at them with my pistol for 2 or 3 rounds. They shoot some of the surrendering men, which becomes a motif, really, as we go forward of Peiper's progress. There's an airfield there, artillery spotter airfield, and they destroy 12 aircraft, light aircraft. So I think a couple get out, and those aircrew, they're so bored in the Ardennes before this happens, they're shooting wild boar from those light aircraft for sport.
Yes.
And they do fight. They find an abandoned army camp and they find jerry cans and rations. But even then, the Americans are still sniping from buildings. They're brewing up the odd tank with a bazooka. There's still sort of friction.
2 platoon leaders are killed.
Yeah.
It's so he's getting, he's being attrited both mechanically and in terms of action.
Yeah.
The spearhead then becomes disorientated and heads north, not west out of the town. So that's a cock up. And they then have to kind of Panzer's once more in the lead. Then they have to kind of realize that they've gone wrong, because they run into an American anti-tank gun.
But we did that a couple of times and we had Google Maps.
Yes, to be fair. And they had pretty bad out-of-date
Michelin maps and stuff,
Michelin maps,
But we managed to do that using Google Maps, so because that's the nature of the place. It's lots of lanes. You come to a crossroads suddenly. Basically, one goes up the ridge, the other goes along the bottom, and that's what you meet everywhere. Endless and small settlements, so you'd be forgiven for thinking you were in one village rather than another, not knowing where you
completely.
were. And all that stuff.
Completely. They bumped into an old Belgian man who's wearing a Nazi armband, and he hails them down and tells them where the American fuel dump is. They've now got hundreds of POWs, so they're then put to kind of the work to refueling. It's now about 9 a.m. on the 17th. So just point out, they are still a day behind at this point.
Yes.
But refueled and reorientated, they then head west. They sweep on through the villages of Domain and Schoppen and Odenwald and Thiremont. And on the way, they overrun Company B of the 245th Engineer Battalion. The panzers twist and turn deliberately over the foxholes to crush those in them. You know, so these are guys who absolutely have kind of learnt the hard tricks and hard knocks on the Eastern Front. Interestingly, not far away, just to the north, is a completely different battle where the 12th SS is about to come in, because the big red one is coming down towards Butgenbach.
Yeah.
And the threat to Peiper is that as his spearhead moves on, he's going to be cut out from his trucks, which are still back at Honsfeld and Bullingham.
He's all flank at the moment, isn't he? That's the point.
Flank, yeah.
He's offering flanks both sides, isn't he?
Yeah. And anyway, he's now moving towards, he's south of Malmedy, heading towards the town of Stavelot. And there's quite a lot of confusion at this point, and quite a lot of troops are on the move. And there's a small little settlement at Bognes, which is like a crossroad, a sort of confluence of roads come into it, one from the west, one from the east, one from the north, one from the south. They're all kind of hurtling into this one little crossroads village. And one of them is a column of US trucks, which is transporting the 285th Field Artillery Observation Battalion.
Yeah.
And they're coming from that road, which is heading from the west. And just as they're heading over the crossroads, the Americans call it the 5 points, the lead Panthers are approaching directly from the south, and there's that road that comes down the hill, doesn't it, from the east. So the Americans are coming from the opposite direction, and there's a road that then joins that road as it comes down the hill, which is coming directly from the south. It's actually ultimately coming from the kind of the southeast, and it's on that road that the leading panzers are there, and it's slightly raised, isn't it? You've got a kind of wood on your left-hand side, and
yes.
the interesting about the Bognes crossroads is it's like a plug in a sink, isn't it?
Yeah.
Kind of everything kind of runs down.
Everything runs down into
the crossroads. And so from there, the leading Panthers in Peiper's battle group can see the American trucks, carrying the 285th Field Artillery Observation Battalion, heading from the west, and they open fire. And at this point, it's around 12:45 p.m. on the 17th of December.
Well, let's take a break there, and we'll come back to, I think, what is one of the most notorious incidents of the Battle of the Bulge. Certainly the thing that seals Joachim Peiper's reputation. Although I think we made it pretty clear what kind of reputation he deserves anyway. We'll see you in a moment.
Ryan Reynolds here from Mint Mobile with a message for everyone paying big wireless way too much. Please, for the love of everything good in this world, stop. With Mint, you can get premium wireless for just $15 a month. Of course, if you enjoy overpaying, no judgments, but that's weird. Okay, one judgment. Anyway, give it a try at mintmobile.com/switch.
Upfront payment of $45 for 3-month plan, equivalent to $15 per month required. Intro rate first 3 months only, then full price plan options available. Taxes and fees extra. See full terms at mintmobile.com.
We off? 30 seconds of carefree bliss.
Oof, like wind in your hair carefree.
Oh, like using Clorox Disinfecting All-Purpose Cleaner in the home carefree.
Yes!
Like dog slobbing on the coffee table and cleaning it with Clorox Carefree.
He's on a roll now.
Spit toothpaste on the faucet.
You got it. You got it.
Peanut butter on the light switch.
Oh, spritz, spritz.
Spritz, spritz. Clorox, man. Clean feels good.
Okay, we're back. Use as directed.
Workdays can be unpredictable, but your workwear shouldn't be. With the Cintas Apparel Plus program, you'll have freshly laundered garments for everyone on your team delivered every week. Cintas has workwear for just about any job imaginable, with high-performance fabrics and an uncompromising fit that stretches and moves with you. Don't leave looking and feeling good to chance. Visit Cintas.com.
Oh, I'm ready!
And get ready for the workday.
We passed over a destroyed land.
Welcome back to We Have Ways of Making You Talk. So it's 12:45.
There's mayhem on the road coming in towards Bognes from the west.
Basically, a column of people being reorganised has run into the Campfgruppe Peiper's spear, essentially. Yep. So it's backstage moving about by the Americans as because these trucks they are in no position or condition to defend themselves, are they? They're LOC people, essentially.
Yeah. And they're in softskins, trucks.
Yeah.
So, trucks veering off the road, men running, others surrendering, maybe a half dozen trucks destroyed. The prisoners are swiftly gathered and they're led to a field by the crossroads. So if you're looking at the crossroads, the road heading north, they've come in from the road heading from the west, and they are in a bit of the field which is in the southwest corner of this crossroads.
Yeah. They're quickly rounded up. the American POWs. Peiper gets onto the Panther commanded by Werner Perchka and says, stop firing, because he wants the trucks, because he's abandoned his trucks, hasn't he?
Yeah.
So he wants the lorries. The fact that there's people in them is by the by. The lead Panthers turn south down the...
so they've come up from the south.
Yeah.
They've then turned left onto the main road running down the hill from the east. And then at the crossroads, they've turned left again on the road that's sort of heading south towards Ligneville.
Basically, just like to sort of corral the POW, stop them running away. So like a sheepdog, really, with a flock, trying to keep them under control.
And Peiper and Perchka push on. They push on down towards Ligneville.
Yeah, they push on.
And Peiper calls out from his tank,
"It's a long way to Tipperary, boys."
Yes, exactly. And off he goes.
Yeah.
So he's on. He's with the spearhead. He's the commander, and of course that's.
So you've survivors of B batteries, around 90 of them, and 11 men from the 32nd Armoured Recce Company, who are assembled in the field just the south of 5 Points, which slopes up to a wood, doesn't it?
Yeah.
It's sort of flat, and then there's a gradient up to a wood.
Then while this happens, 3 trucks of B Company of the 86th Engineer Battalion comes down the hill from Malmedy, because Malmedy is a few miles to the north of the 5 Points.
Yeah.
And so they come down. They halt behind several stopped ambulances. They're fired on by the Germans. 5 men manage to get away. 4 further trucks arrive, but then manage to kind of hastily scarper backwards.
So this means at 2 p.m, there's 113 POWs in this field.
Yeah.
And at 2:15, shooting starts. Some of Peiper's men open fire. And after this, they then go into the field and they finish off the wounded with rifle butts, single shots.
Yeah.
And this is evidenced by burn marks on the men who've been shot at very close range.
Yeah.
By 2:30, the shootings ended. The murder has stopped. And around 3, so it's all within an hour, isn't it?
Yeah.
61 more POWs who are still alive. They try to escape. 15 more shot in that. And then 3 more die later. But Peiper's not there when it happens, but it is his men. It is the style of his outfit. It's the manner to which they've become accustomed to fight war. But it's 84 of the 113 are killed, and they strip them of their boots and their watches. They also set fire to the cafe nearby, and the Belgian owner comes out of the cafe delighted to see the Germans and is then killed anyway. There's a killing spree going on, isn't there?
Yeah.
Peiper's gone. Campfgruppe Peiper has gone by 4. And the Americans discover the dead immediately.
Yeah, because they're just left there. I mean, Michael Reynolds, who's a former general, has written about this, wrote a book called The Devil's Adjutant. And he is not justifying this by any stretch of the imagination, but he does point out that massacres of people who are in a hurry, of prisoners, is as old as the hills. And when you are in a rush and you've got no time to corral them and, pressure's on to just keep going, what do you do with these people? And of course, there is those, there's those episodes of by American troops in the 45th Infantry Division in Sicily, for example.
Yeah.
So it's hardly unique.
No.
But, as you point out, messages about the massacre reach US 1st Army headquarters only by 4:50 p.m.
I know, that's amazing, within 2 hours of it happening, basically. This is a thing that the Americans then leap on as a piece of news, don't they? To tell their soldiers that, what's amazing, it goes past all the censors, and it's in the American newspapers the following day, back home. It's absolutely extraordinary. And they use, you can see that the US Army leaps on it and goes, this is what's coming. You need to stand and fight. And word gets round immediately that this has happened. Yeah. And we see this in Normandy as well, the Canadians, when prisoners are killed, word gets round very, very, very quickly. And it breaks the rule, doesn't it? You do as you would be done by. You would like to be taken prisoner in the event of your defeat. So you take the other side prisoner. Reciprocity breaks down.
Reciprocity.
Well, it is.
It is. That's such a good word.
Yeah, it's exactly what it is. So he pushes on, and the next place Peiper's trying to get to Stavelot.
Yeah, but he goes through Longueville.
Yeah.
Do you remember we went down that valley? You go down a valley and you sort of turn right through the trees, and there's Longueville at the bottom. And they run into some Shermans. They lose another Panzer IV.
And it's one of those roads that wriggles along the side of the valley hill, just up from the river, so it can't be flooded. And you twist and turn, and you wriggle your way down. Yes, and they run into a picket, and Stavelot is on a...
Well, they also shoot another 8 POWs at Longueville.
It is the leitmotif. They get to Stavelot. Stavelot's on the Amblev River. There's a bridge there. The Americans aren't really holding it in any particular strength. The bridge is supposedly ready to be blown. But, I mean, it's just amazing, this single American soldier coming out and saying, halt, to the lead tank in Peiper's formation. I mean, the nerve of the guy.
Yeah. He fires back with a rifle. And in his testimony he gives to the Germans afterwards in his foreign military studies, he says, well, we got attacked and it was obvious it was really heavily held and all the rest of it, so I pulled back for the night. It's a total lie.
Yeah.
Stavelot was not heavily held. The effects of Pervitin had obviously started to wear off. And, he was absolutely knackered. He just desperately needed some kit. I mean, he hadn't slept for 3 nights or something. I mean, but he does. And the bottom line is that Stavelot is not heavily held. And Stavelot's a lovely little town, isn't it? We stayed there. It was gorgeous. And, it's all cobbled streets and beamed buildings. And, it looks like
food.
sort of, medieval sort of wool town or something. That's what it kind of feels like. It's got that kind of vibe. Huge, great kind of monasteries in there, isn't there? And sort of big imposing buildings and stuff. I mean, it's a really, really pretty place. But anyway, he doesn't go in. So what he decides to do is attack the following morning on the 18th of December. So far they've travelled 36 miles. They're halfway to the Meuse, and they've still got a hell of a long way to get to Antwerp. So what he does do is that morning on the 18th, he sends off some of his panzers to see whether there's another way to cross the river Amblève at Trois Ponts, which, as its name suggests, is 3 bridges, because that's where the Zaum and the Amblève meet.
Yes.
So there's actually double lot of rivers going through Trois Ponts. And at the same time, the kind of northern part of that is being, the 1st Infantry Division starting to arrive, and, they're strengthening up on the northern front. So he's got quite a narrow little corridor in which he can go through. Can't go through to the north. That's shut to him. Yeah. So he's got to go on this direction. If you sort of think of the bulge, draw a kind of rough line north-south, and you think of these various thrusts heading kind of westwards, kind of narrow little corridors, his room for manoeuvre is pretty tight. Yeah. It's got to be east-west, and it's got to be within this sort of 10-mile stretch, really. And obviously in the Ardennes, with its windy rivers and its kind of hills and narrow roads, that's quite limiting.
Well, that's the thing when you go there, is it breaks down into these small hops, and each hop he makes, you can see why he's paused as well. How long is his line? We said his order of march is 15 miles long. You can see why you might stop rather than spread yourself even further.
Because the thing is, I mean, again, in fairness to Peiper on that night, he doesn't know what's in the town.
No.
And Americans come out, the bridge is clearly kind of ready for explosion. His men are knackered. He's knackered. It's only his spearhead that's arrived. This, and as you say, the 15 miles gets longer and longer and longer, and it goes from being a 15-mile march order to, well, probably best part of 25 by this point.
Yeah, exactly.
What he can't afford to do is have any reverses. So, he thinks it's better to kind of wait for his men to catch up and attack in strength the following morning, which he does. And to be fair, he does it at 4 a.m. So he's only had a couple of hours kip. He deploys Panzer Grenadiers, which is the infantry, mounted, armoured infantry, on the southern fringes of the on the bridge over the Amblève. But overnight, of course, Stavelot has been reinforced by the Americans. And there's a company of the 526th Armoured Infantry Battalion, which is one of these, so where you have the US Armoured Division, you have 3 tank battalions, and you have 3 Armoured Infantry Battalions. And these are rather like the Panzer Grenadiers. They're infantry in half tracks. With a bit more kind of machine guns to call upon, etc.
Well, and 6-pounders, 57mm tank guns. So I think the initial encounter where the lead Panther comes down and is hit by a 57mm gun, it's damaged. It's not terminally damaged. The Panther fires back and literally runs over the gun.
Yeah,
that's still typical friction. It's the typical friction that the Germans are encountering. But that's not supposed to have happened. That's not meant to be going on. We talked in the first or second episode, Hitler's assuming that the Americans aren't going to be able to redeploy because Eisenhower is going to have to ask permission, whereas in fact that's not what's happened at all. They've thrown everything at it. And that gun crew holding up that Panther, even though not completely successfully, it's enough.
Yeah.
And this is any delay is delay wrecks the whole thing. And the town then turns into sort of proper, like the fighting in Stavelot is this sort of, they're slugging it out. It's not easy. It's not simple. Peiper's being held up. Yeah. And at the same time, there is an enormous fuel dump at Francorchamps, not far away, 124,000.
Very close to the Spa racetrack circuit.
Exactly, yes, because you're in that neck of the woods. And the hotel we stayed in Stavelot had lots of Grand Prix stuff, didn't it? Formula One stuff, didn't it? There's 124,000 gallons at Francorchamps that they don't know about. They don't know about, and then the Americans set fire to it. I mean, that's quite something, isn't it?
Yeah, so it's a hell of a lot, and the Americans just set it on fire. So, that's that. Germans can't afford them to be torched. Anyway, so there's these 3 bridges at Trois Ponts, one over the Amblève, 2 over the River Zalm, and Stavelot battle is still fighting, while the lead panzers of Kampfgruppe Peiper have been head on to Trois Ponts. Trois Ponts is probably further 3 miles, something like that. Kind of further west from Stavelot, and again, it's a kind of little winding road down the valley that takes you there. All 3 bridges have been prepared for demolitions. So there's a 57mm gun knocks out the lead panzer at 11:45 a.m. So remember that the start of the Stavelot battle is at 4 a.m. So it's quite a long time after.
Yeah.
This gun is quickly destroyed, but then one of the wounded gunners escapes and manages to warn his fellow engineers that, that the Jerrys are on their way. And then all 3 bridges are blown. So, that's no good for Peiper.
Well,
and they haven't got any bridging equipment because that's miles behind.
Well, and Peiper says those verdammpt engineers. He knows that that really is, he's done then, isn't he? He's cooked.
He's cooked really, but he's still going on. So he's like, okay, well, let's just push north and see what happens if you go north. They then turn north, but again, the path is blocked by mines. Lead tank fires into them, detonates them, drives on. It's all a bit manic, isn't it? It's all a bit frantic. The main column is heading to La Glaise. They reached a village. Then a bridge over the Amblève is found at Cheneux, which is this tiny little village on a sort of it's on a bluff, isn't it?
Yeah.
It's got one side of it's got a sort of steep escarpment dropping down to a little valley. But then in the afternoon, the weather clears and the column is hit by fighter bombers. 2 tanks, several half-tracks hit, blocking the road. US observation aircraft also spot the bulk of KG Peiper column and obviously report that back. By dusk, the road is cleared, but fuel is now extremely low.
Yeah.
The column presses on to the key town of Werbemont, but as they approach the river Lienne, the lead Tiger II spots US engineers manning the bridge. King Tiger fires first, scattering the engineers, but one man rushes back to the detonator and blows the bridge. So they're still 26 miles short of the Meuse. And that route has now been blocked to them as well.
Yeah.
So it's all going pretty badly wrong at this point.
Yeah.
And meanwhile, of course, there are these other SS thrusts because south of Peiper's the Kampfgruppe and Hansen under Sturmbannführer Max Hansen. Their main role is to provide flank protection for KG Peiper.
Yeah.
And then behind them is Kampfgruppe and Knittel.
Knittel is one of the famous images of the Battle of the Bulge, isn't he? There's a photograph of him on his Schwimmwagen.
Yes, with the cigar and the kind of jaunty cap.
Exactly. Yes, giving it the jaunty cap bad guy thing.
Kaiser Barak crossroads, which is now a light industrial estate.
Yeah, yes, exactly. So you go there and it's one of those opportunities to visit a battlefield that has changed completely. Kampfgruppe Hansen, they also have blood on their hands. On the 17th of December, they pick up 11 black soldiers from the 333rd Field Artillery Battalion. Most of these guys have been captured, but 11 escape and are hiding in the village. Hansen's men catch them, lead them out, made them run ahead of their Schwimmwagen, and then they start to run them down. They bayonet them and beat all 11 of these men to death. They're found over a month later. This is the fingerprint of these Kampfgruppe, is that they're murdering prisoners. And I know what you said earlier, Jim, but that just the element of cruelty of chasing them down, bayoneting them.
That's completely vindictive. The sense you get from that is they've captured and they've released them. Well, not released them, but they're saying, okay, we'll march down the road, and then they just sort of chase them and knock them over into the hedge. It's sort of like sport almost.
Yeah, brutal, violent, racist sport.
Then you've got the 14th Cavalry Group, which those of you who were listening to the earlier episodes will remember was the small reconnaissance group that's in the Lossheim Gap. They've pulled back to a little place called Potto. It's a tiny little village. But the 106th Division is obviously needing reinforcements. So part of this is the 7th Armoured Division is pushing forward. And you've got elements of the 18th Cavalry, Troop C of the 32nd Cavalry, and a platoon of towed guns from the 820th Tank Destroyer Battalion. So these are towed tank destroyers rather than track tank destroyers. All in Task Force Maze under Major J.L. Mays. And they are moving kind of eastwards. And they come round a corner just a little bit to the east of Potto. And they run straight into the spearhead of Kampfgruppe and Hansen. And the lead tank and armoured car are set on fire and they block the road. Task Force Maze hastily pulls back towards the crossroads at Potto. But this is where that famous footage of sort of mean-looking Waffen-SS types
smoking American cigarettes.
Yeah.
burning
There's
vehicles.
footage. It was later captured by the Americans in turn, but that's where those still photographs and the film photographs come from of that. But actually, Hansen is then pulled back out of that, and it's left to the 9th SS to continue that particular battle, and that's really, in a way, an extension of the San Vit battle, which we'll talk about in the next episode. But while all this is going on, the bottom line is resistance is stiffening. A battalion of the US 30th Infantry Division has reached Stavelot and is attacking and retaking the town. So Peiper had been expecting the 3rd Fallschirmjäger Division to mop up behind and secure the thrust, but it just hadn't got there.
Yeah, they haven't shown up.
So what's happened is he's got his spearhead and it's been cut off. He's now isolated. By the morning of the 19th of December, Stavelot is entirely back in US hands and Kampfgruppe Peiper is completely cut off. So the whole thing is beginning to unravel. And you can see that Peiper's getting really, really frantic. He tries a different route from La Glaise. This time he goes to the little town of Stoumont. That 19th of December, troops of the 119th Infantry Regiment, part of the 30th Division, also reached Stoumont. So the whole of the division is sort of basically coming down from the north to kind of intercept. And so with every passing hour, Kampfgruppe Peiper is just hitting more and more resistance and opposition. And he's now only got 19 Panthers, 6 Panzer IVs and 6 King Tigers, which is, what's that, 31 tanks out of 117.
Yeah. 86 tanks knocked out, conked out, bogged down, or out of fuel. He's no longer combat effective.
No.
But you're an extremely motivated SS guy full of speed.
Sort of
what are you going to... and
Vim and speed. Yeah, what are you
Vim
going
and
to do?
speed.
But all the time, more reinforcements are on the way. So they're coming up now against the 743rd Tank Battalion, the 740th Tank Battalion. It's amazing. The 740th is hurried there, has only just arrived in Belgium, but they take some British Shermans. The British hand over their Shermans that they've got, some DDs plus a couple of Jacksons, which is these M36 90mm tank destroyers, and they hurry towards Stoumont. Americans counterattacked towards Stoumont railway station in fog that afternoon of the 19th. Fierce fighting. This is mainly around St. Edward Sanatorium, west of the town, which is still there. 260 locals hiding in the cellars. I mean, it's all desperate stuff. The M36 Jackson knocks out a Panther, which was blocking the road. 2 further Panthers destroyed in the fighting. And Peiper just can't get beyond Targnon. Fuel is an ongoing issue. He's worried about his rear being too stretched out, so he just halts. I mean, he's gone 50 miles, but he needs to go 80 in total to reach the Meuse. So he's just not getting anywhere. The rest of the road west of Stoumont is the furthest they're going to get. They've been blocked at the River Lienne going on to Wourbemont. Those routes have all blocked. He's absolutely trapped now. So his only option is to pull back to La Glaise.
But as we've said, we've just listed his problems. He's being attrited at a wild rate. He's running out of fuel. He's disconnected from the rest of his train.
Yep.
Let's say he's got to go another 30 miles to get to the Meuse. Let's say he gets there with his 2 Panthers and his Schwimmwagen. I mean,
what are you going to do?
Which is at the rate he's going, that's what he's going to end up with. What's he going to do?
And then what?
Exactly.
It's absolutely nonsense. But meanwhile, not only has the 30th Infantry arrived and various tank battalions, so too has General Gavin.
Yes, here to redeem himself.
Oh, thank goodness. You just can't have a series without Gavin coming into it. Anyway, he's got his CP at Wourbemont, and he sent forward, those great lads, the 504th Parachute Infantry Regiment. These are the originals. They're the kind of hardest, meanest, toughest. They've been there in North Africa. They've been there in Sicily. They've been there at Salerno, at Anzio. They've been there at Market Garden. They've crossed the River Wall. They're absolute legends. And they end up having this massive fight at Chenot, which was the one bridge that was still intact on the 20th and the 21st. And this is written up in those Devils in Baggy Pants by Ross Carter. That absolutely brilliant book. And if I just can't recommend that enough. It's fantastic. Should we do the Ross Carter quote?
Why not?
Our men, strung out unevenly through the wires, had nearly reached midfield and were beginning to climb another fence when it happened. Suddenly, thousands of tracer bullets, uncannily but beautiful despite their lethal purpose, arched and crisscrossed above us. Their flickering flames turned the night into day and men into targets. The air was filled with the yellow glow of hissing 20mm cannon shells, the sputter of machine guns, and the roar of exploding mortar shells dumped on our comrades just behind us. Pretty vivid. We were there, weren't we? Standing on that field, just beneath Chenot.
Well, you look up that bluff there, you think, well, no one's getting up there in a hurry.
Well, it's interesting because he's coming up against some Panzer Grenadiers and against a Luftwaffe light flak unit.
Yep.
Which has got these half tracks with cannons on them.
Incredibly effective anti-personnel weapon.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Yeah. By this point, so while the battle is going on for Chenot on the 20th and 21st of December, Kampfgruppe Knittel is told to reinforce Stavelot, as is Hansen the following day on the 21st of December. But by this point, it's over. They can do nothing. They're against a town which is now very kind of fiercely held. And by the end of the 21st, Peiper's stuck basically at La Glaise. He's completely surrounded. He's got the 82nd Airborne in front of him. He's got the 30th Infantry Division plus sundry tank units behind him. There's no way out. And on the 22nd of December, Peiper's only got 1,500 troops left. 2/3 have gone. And 13 Panthers, 6 Panzer IVs and 6 King Tigers.
I mean, in a way, there is...
He's down to 25 tanks.
But there's fighting all day and the Americans are pressing him. But in a way, they don't need to do anything now. They've contained him. As long as you hold him there, you can shell him or starve him out. It's over. The Battle of the Bulge is seen as principally the siege at Bastogne. The 101st are surrounded with supporting, in the popular imagination, if it's seen as anything, right?
Yeah.
Yet here we have, at the same time, the reverse situation for the Germans, and they've completely got themselves in this mess. There's no one to blame but themselves for this, isn't it? It's quite extraordinary.
And the 23rd of December is just them at La Glaise being pounded all day. I mean, there's one single long tom, 150mm long tom, fires 200 rounds. It just absolutely hammers it. And we were up there in La Glaise where that King Tiger is in the kind of town square, and this is a place of narrow roads and winding streets, and it's no place for heavy armor at all, is it? I mean, it just really isn't.
No.
2 p.m.
Peiper finally faces the music, doesn't he? At 2 o'clock, and asks Merker for permission to break out that night. And there's 800 guys still fit enough to do it. They leave the wounded behind. They disable their vehicles and they melt away into the night.
Yeah, at 2 a.m. on the 24th, on Christmas Eve, they have to walk through the night, about 20 kilometers, what's that, 12 miles to safety to reach German lines, which they do on Christmas Day, and 770 make it. That's all that's left, Peiper included.
Unbelievable.
And on the 25th of December, Christmas Day, Kampfgruppe Knittel is finally pulled out, and that's the last troops pulled back from the Stavelot area. So by Christmas, the whole area is back in US hands. So by Christmas Day, the whole 6th Panzer Army thrust, the main one, has totally failed. But of course, there is plenty more going on further south, where 5th Panzer Army are causing major consternation amongst the Allies. And, of course, a change of command. And we'll be looking at that epic, the defence of St. Vit, in the next episode.
But what this is, and I think what's interesting is you inevitably end up telling this as the story of Kampfgruppe Peiper and centering them. But what this actually is a story of incredible American improvisation, reaction, all hands to the pump. Those engineers blowing those bridges, defending those bridges, hanging on. The single guy crawling back and blowing that bridge. Peiper's trying to do this on will alone, and what he's coming up against is American grit.
Yeah.
And the grit is grinding the will down, as it were.
Yeah, that's absolutely spot on. Spot on.
Right, well, thanks for listening, everyone. We'll be back with the Southern Thrust, and we may even end up talking about Bastogne at some point. I don't know. Who knows? We've somehow managed to avoid it so far.
Look forward to that in episode 7.
These episodes, of course, are all together on our Officer Class We Have Ways channel. You can join the Patreon. You can join us at We Have Ways Festival, the 12th to the 14th of September. We've been talking about program this week, and it's all very exciting, actually. What's coming together, isn't it, Jim?
Yeah, you bet.
You bet. Okay, thanks for listening, everyone. Cheerio und tschüssi tschüss.
Tschüssi tschüss.